Hello, fellow empath and sweet soul. One trend that I started noticing in my practice in working with clients who struggled with binge eating was I suspected that they were empaths. And then when I started asking and actually adding that to my intake form, over 90% of the people I work with who struggled with binge eating also identified as empaths. And I found this fascinating because this was something that I put two and two together after working with countless empaths and likely countless empaths in bariatric surgery and in my private practice. And when I started to reflect on my own behaviors, I was like, wow, I think this starts with trauma. And especially in an empath who is absorbing the energies and the thoughts and feelings and emotions of family members around them, and especially if they are raised in a household with a narcissist or, whether the parent, caregiver, family member, I just started seeing all these associations, and there's no, I haven't looked into any research regarding this, so there's there's no research to back this up. This is my hypothesis, unproven, but it is really interesting to me to have seen the connection in my own practice and to hear the same stories over and over again, because the majority of them also, not all of them, but the majority of them had a narcissist parent. And it's possible that the other clients don't know about narcissism. It's possible. It's possible that they just had parents that were not on a borderline personality spectrum. But what I found really interesting, and especially when I was listening to their stories of growing up and when they started struggling with food, almost all of them can remember exactly when they started having, disordered or bingy type eating behaviors. And I know personally, mine started to kick up in middle school, and and my parents had divorced when I was very young, and then I had two step parents, and so that was just a lot to juggle for someone who was always considered so sensitive. And you probably heard that growing up too, like you're too sensitive, you just need to toughen up and develop thick skin. Which, by the way, our empathic abilities are gifts. And once you can start to harness them and work with them, and also recognize the importance of creating boundaries for people who are crossing your boundaries, magic can really happen. And what really helped me the most was taking a mindful eating journey, so that I could start connecting my own dots on why I was doing what I was doing with food, because I was so unaware of my own personal triggers that were causing me to eat. And this is the journey that I take with clients too, as we start really focusing on what is the emotion, what is the feeling, what is the sensation, what happened during your day. Was it a conversation with a parent? Was it, something that happened at work? Was there something that happened with your, spouse or boyfriend or loved one or neighbor? I mean, there's so much, some of us, I almost feel like empaths also can reside on a spectrum. And there are some who might not be as sensitive as others. I don't know. I don't even know if that matters. But I think it's important to take, if you struggle with binge eating and you identify as an empath, it's really important to take a step back and think about your own origin story and when things started to as far as you can remember, when you first started to have some dysregulated behaviors with food. And what I mean by that is you weren't eating for your body's natural hunger cues. So maybe you were eating for, what I hear the most from clients is that they will overeat sweets, or they will wipe out a bag of chips, or fill in the blank with any kind of food. They know that they want to be healthy and they're trying to lose weight, and there's a lot of judgment that can occur when they're not following whatever kind of diet rule they've regulated for themselves. Oh my goodness, that's a lot, right? I mean, my body needed to take a breath because that was just a lot to even process. So if you can think back to when you first started using food as a coping mechanism because of your overwhelming emotions, then that can help you start to piece together aspects of your life with food and what might have been driving those behaviors. And I think it's so fascinating. I remember a client, when I first started working with her, she remembered the very first time she had ever binged. And I was like, oh my goodness, I had never really, and this was before I started working in eating behavior, as an eating disorder dietitian. And she did not come to me for binge eating. She came to me for weight loss and was considering bariatric surgery. And I was like, wow, that is fascinating. And then I started thinking about the first time I binged. And it became very obvious. I'm sure there were times where I overconsumed candy. Halloween, the holidays, I loved candy as a child. It was medicine for me. But then the first time I remember feeling like an out of control binge was after I had given up sweets as an after school snack for 2 weeks because we were going on our senior ski trip. And then when I made brownies and took them on the bus, and I had a full-on binge. And then I never even realized it or connected the dots that, wow, my restrictive behaviors, me cutting out my daily afternoon snack from school of sweets that I loved, and then me overeating them because I was restricting them. What went on in my head was that, oh my God, you're going to gain weight. You're a bad person. You're out of control. We have to start wrenching down the restrictive behaviors even more. And while I understand that mentality, because that's what is pumped out into our collective as, needing to be in control of your food and yourself and your weight and everything else, women, we have adopted this belief that we are not a good person unless we dutifully are a certain size or body weight or look a certain way or don't age or, fill in the blank with all these pressures that we can adopt from society, but we can also opt out of that. It's very important as empaths, especially those who feel 100 to 1,000 times more than the average person and lacks the filters that the average person has, which narcissists can sense that, and so then we become very attractive to them and can become victims to their manipulation. But it's important to just be able to think back to where all of this started so that you'll be able to start piecing your own puzzle pieces together about how you got to where you are today. And that's really important information because awareness about yourself is really the only way you're going to be able to start working towards making different decisions. Is, in my opinion, you have to understand or have some type of understanding of what started this behavior in the first place. And from a mindfulness lens, it's so that you can extend yourself compassion for trying to find a coping mechanism that would work for you. Because when we're kids, if you're 6 or 7 years old, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to find drugs or alcohol or other type of coping mechanisms to deal with the overwhelming anguish and pain and mental suffering that you're going through. And, for me, candy was my medicine. And I worked, and as a kid, I would pull weeds, I would babysit. I learned that money would buy my things that I needed to cope and to feel good about myself. And then eventually, those behaviors can start to catch up with you and snowball and create a seemingly impossible scenario to get out of. But I just want to assure you, regardless of where you are with any type of, binge eating behaviors, any kind of disordered eating behaviors, the awareness and shining a light on where these started can really help you start to unpack where to begin, and then also to infuse a lot of compassion towards yourself for doing the best job that you possibly could. And I really appreciate working with, mindfulness and going on a mindful eating, walking down the mindful eating path, because that is what truly restored my eating behaviors. And the same thing happens for clients. Sometimes it can feel really uncomfortable to think about where things are coming from in terms of your behaviors. And if it feels too overwhelming, please do not do this alone. Please reach out to a qualified mental health provider and or a registered dietitian nutritionist, ideally someone who is mindfully trained, to help you through that process. And if you also can find a provider who is empathic and an empath or highly sensitive, then that can feel very supportive in your journey as well. So I hope this has been helpful for you. You have a little bit of homework to do. Kind of think about your own origin story if you do struggle with binge eating and where that came from. And I will see you in the next video. Bye, love.